Here is Ed Berliner sitting in for Steve Molesberg. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Newsmax TV. Steve's taking another day off. We want to wish all of our viewers a very happy Passover for the holiday. We're going to get right down to business because, quite frankly, the Newsmax website has blown up today thanks to an article written by our next guest. It basically says that the Electoral College is about to become extinct if certain people have their way. The exact title: Democrats conspiring to rig Electoral College, law passed in 9 states thus far. You heard me right. Let us welcome in our guest. A pleasure once again. Author, commentator, political consultant Dick Morris joins us on the telephone. Dick, you have once again managed to blow up the website, my friend. Where did this come from?
It needs to blow up. This is the most incredible thing, and I never heard about it, and most people have never heard about it. There is a plot afoot in the Democratic Party, partially funded by Soros, to pass laws in each state legislature in the United States saying that that state's electors have got to vote for the winner of the popular vote, regardless of how the voters in that particular state. And this law has passed in 9 states, representing 135 electoral votes, and it has passed one house in another 10 states, representing 107 electoral votes. So combined, at least one house has passed them in 242 electoral votes worth of states. Now that's important because the plan is when they hit 270, which is a majority of the Electoral College, they will at that point effectively have amended the Constitution and junked the Electoral College. Because if the states could comprise 270 electoral votes, a majority, have decided that they will ignore how their state's voters vote and will vote for the winner of the popular vote, it means that if the Electoral College stays in existence, it's vestigial. It's an anachronism. They'll just meet, and the 270 will block vote for the winner of the popular vote, and he'll be elected president.
Dick, how did this sneak in under the radar? I mean, it's the first question I want to ask is that. How did this sneak under the radar?
Well, it snuck. Of the states that have passed it, all 10 are blue states. And of the 10 that have passed in one house, 8 are blue states, Arkansas is a red state, and North Carolina flips back and forth. But it's worse than that, Ed. We're not even at the worst part yet.
We're all keen to guess on the worst part here. This sounded pretty bad from the beginning.
If elections are determined based on popular vote, not only will this empower the big city machines in places like New York and Chicago to drag out the vote, which they now do not do, because who cares, the state's blue anyway. But it will also open the door to non-citizen voting. It is perfectly legal in the United States for a non-citizen to vote if the state legislature says it's okay in that state. There's no provision in the federal Constitution requiring that you be a citizen to vote. Franchises are completely decided at the state level. And until 1926, when the last state repealed it, various states did permit non-citizens to vote. So what I think is going to happen is if this thing passes, the California legislature will announce that non-citizens, even if they're here illegally, are allowed to vote. Right now they're allowed to sit on juries. You're allowed to be a lawyer in California. If you're not a citizen or here illegally, you're allowed to serve on a jury. It's a short step to permit them to vote. That would put 3 or 4 million new Democratic votes on the franchise in California. And if other states followed suit, or even if they didn't, it would permanently tip the popular vote balance to the Democratic Party. So you could never elect a Republican president for the end of time, till the end of time. And that is what is happening, and they are now only a hair's breadth away from winning it.
Well, I do want to go back there because you're right on all this, but let me go back just a little bit because you said 9 states and the District of Columbia have all joined in this so far. Now,
yes,
with 9 states and D.C. sitting there, pardon me, I guess, for being naive, but I would have to imagine that somehow, some way, someone would have noticed that this was happening at least in 1, 2, 3, 4. So how did we get to 9? and neither the media nor anybody else, we certainly haven't heard this from any Republicans who've made notice of this.
Right.
So how did this stay so quiet?
God knows, but I'm shrieking it from the rooftops. California has ratified it, and the 9-state total does not include New York State, where both houses have passed it, and it's awaiting on Cuomo's desk for an inevitably positive signature. That would bring the total up from 135 to 164. New York has 29 votes. When they reach 270, they will de facto have amended the Constitution. Normally, to amend the Constitution, you need 2/3 of Congress of each house and 3/4 of the states. But what they're doing is circumventing that procedure, and by getting a majority of the states, or states with a majority of the electoral votes, to pass this law, which is binding on the electors they select from their states, the Electoral College will basically cease to operate.
Would it be fair to say that there wouldn't be a Republican anywhere who would be shocked to find out that behind this, according to your article, is the Center for Voting and Democracy, which just happens to be a group funded by George Soros?
Yeah, nobody would be surprised. It's also funded, to be fair, by Tom Golisano, who's a gadfly, parole-linked guy in New York State who ran for governor a couple of times and is just very wealthy. But the movement is dressed up as being a democracy movement because it's the popular vote. But the fact of the matter is that if you let the popular vote determine it, each state decides who votes within their state. And non-citizen voting can completely swamp the presidential election.
We're going to go back to the Electoral College here, Dick, because this goes back many years, and I certainly have heard this throughout my lifetime, where there are a number of people who will say, oh, come on, the Electoral College is old, it's served its purpose, it's not useful, we should have the popular vote in America. And I guarantee you there's people who are going to be saying that right now. So I'm going to leave it to you to explain.
I would basically normally agree with them. I believe, for example, that it was basically wrong for Bush to have become president when Gore won the popular vote. I think it was legal and it was what should have happened. It was the law, but I don't think it was the democratic thing to do, certainly. But this is different because you do not have uniform voting rules in every state. And with 11 million people living in the United States, unable to vote, but living here, the potential to swamp the popular vote, to pack the popular vote with non-citizen voters is huge. And as I said, there is no provision in the Constitution that limits the franchise to non-citizens. All the provisions of the Constitution that relate to voting are to protect the franchise from being restricted. You can't deny it to people based on race or religion or previous condition of servitude. There are all kinds of restrictions on who you can restrict the franchise. But there is no requirement that you be a citizen in order to vote. Every state now requires that, but that's a state law that could easily be changed by any of these blue states. And I believe California is on the cusp of doing that anyway.
Is it a little bit, perhaps not shocking, but surprising, as your article pointed out, that there are some Republicans who are certainly behind this and are adding their support to it?
Yeah, I'm not sure there are Republicans behind it. There are Republicans backing it. Fred Thompson is backing it. And the New York State Senate, that's Republican, passed this. But as I said, of the 19 states plus the D.C., of the 20 that have passed it, 18 and a half are reliable blue states. North Carolina's the half. So I think some Republicans have been fooled by it and are voting for it because, as you know and as you point out, there's not been any publicity or pushback by the Republican Party. But there better be. If the states where one house has passed it have the other house pass it, you're going to have 242 electoral votes. Add in Minnesota, which is Democrat, and Wisconsin, which could go either way, and you're up to over 264, 65 electoral votes. And at that point, any little state, New Hampshire or New Mexico, or one of them could put it over the top. A lot of the very large and very small states are backing this because they say the only states that get any attention are the swing states, and we feel neglected. The whole campaign is only in Ohio and Florida, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, the list of swing states. So non-swing states are sometimes seeing this as a vehicle for their own empowerment. But they have not stopped to think of two facts. First, the capacity of big city Democratic machines to get out the vote and commit voter fraud, by the way. And secondly, the potential of non-citizens voting, basically ending the chance for a Republican national victory.
All right, so we're now at the point here where the story is out. You've broken the story on Newsmax.com, so let's take it to the next logical step. What has to happen for the Republicans, or anybody for that matter, who does not want to see this happen? Where do we go from here to stop this?
I would hope that Reince Priebus, who I've reached out to but haven't spoken to yet, would issue a statement opposing this, and would get in touch with the Republican leadership of every state in the country and urging them to oppose this. And citizens who are alarmed about it, and you should be, need to contact their local legislative leaders and Republican leaders and raise hell about this.
You also brought out the fact that there are some key battles coming up in Arkansas and North Carolina, correct?
Yeah, those are the two states that have red tinges on them, in which one house has voted on it and approved it. It'll now go to the other house in Arkansas. Arkansas is a red state, but both houses and the governor are Democrats. North Carolina is a state that's in play, but one house has already passed this. And the other places that are strategic are Minnesota and Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, in particular, you have a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, but a history of Democratic presidential voting. So Wisconsin would be another place that's crucial. And then every other place. I mean, a state like Utah or Alaska could say, hey, look, I have 4 electoral votes. That gives me no leverage at all. I never see a presidential candidate up here. If it's the popular vote, maybe I'll be able to participate in presidential elections. And that is an appeal that certainly is understandable and logical. But when you think about the implications of this, you realize that it amounts to the elimination of the Republican Party.
Dick, I'm always in favor of putting things in very simple terms for some people because some people simply need it in 10 words or less or 30 seconds or less. So let me give you 30 seconds, if you would, to speak to the casual voter out there and tell them why this is so important.
We must not abandon the Electoral College and use the national popular vote, because the potential for Democratic states to allow non-citizens to vote would permanently make a Democratic president.
Which would only be good for one side, and the one side that likely will be the side that will be listening. Dick, once again, you have managed to break news here on Newsmax.com. I have a feeling you're going to be busy for the next couple of days discussing this with people. We thank you very much for your time again, Dick.
Thanks, man.
All right, take care. So once again, the article is on Newsmax.com. Democrats conspiring to rig Electoral College, the law passed in 9 states thus far. With my media knowledge and having been in the business a long time, I'm not shocked that a story like this, quite frankly, simply hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves. Pay attention, America. This one is important. This is the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Ed Berliner sitting in, and we'll continue on the Tuesday Dance Card on Newsmax.com.